Hello, welcome to the Cecchetti Institute and today's presentation. My name is Barbara Gaskill and I am one of the three co-founders of the Cecchetti Institute, along with Cara Drower and Pamela Moore, both of whom are with us here today. Our focus in this session is on Miss Margaret Peggy Marsh and what she has to tell us through a recording that has been generously gifted to us about the true nature of Enrico Cecchetti's teachings. Following the approximately 20 minutes with Miss Marsh, we will more thoroughly introduce Pamela Moore, who coached for her diploma with Miss Marsh, and will tell us about that experience. Throughout these portions of the afternoon, we ask that you please remain muted. We will open everything up for comments, questions, reflections, and anything toward the end. First, I should provide a very tiny bit of background. Don't worry about taking notes. This small introduction, plus additional details about Miss Marsh, will be made available to all of you within a day or two. So, born Margaret Grace Barham on May 19, 1912, to parents Hurry Herbert Stanley Marsh and Grace Mary Marsh, she was baptized on September 21 of that year. Margaret, who also went by Peggy, at the age of 15, was one of the last young pupils of Enrico Cecchetti to have traveled from abroad to study with him in his final years, after he had departed London and was teaching in Milan. Thus, she is a very important figure in the continuity of line in understanding the nature of Enrico Cecchetti's teaching. She is a direct link for us, not only to the maestro himself, but to the early days of the method as we know it, both in England and in the U.S. For in addition to those with whom she worked in London, there were many teachers in the U.S. who learned from Miss Marsh, primarily during her trips to Cecchetti Council of America summer programs over the years, myself included. However, very sadly, discovering more about this lovely woman and direct link to our heritage has proven quite elusive. There is nearly nothing about her available through basic internet searches, other than the fact that there's a scholarship in her name that's offered annually by the Cecchetti Society in England. For instance, it was only through some very convoluted searches using my personal Ancestry.com account that I was able to come up with the dates for her birth. Marriage in January 1950 to Hugh Carleon Foster Barham, and death on January 10, 1994. Following are several images that we've received in the past few weeks. Thank you so much to those who sent them. Do keep them coming.
These are some of my thoughts and memories of Cecchetti's classes at the Scala Milan, when I trained with him for 6 months. I was lucky to be accepted into what was called his outside class, which was attended by the principal dancers of the company, or who had left the school, and any outsiders like myself, and there were very few of them. I missed so much by not understanding Italian, but Vincenzo Celli, who spoke English, was so kind in translating all my corrections and also often taking me into a corner to unravel some of the enchaînements. That is, until I learned a little of the language. I'm talking about a few impressions I gained from him and hoping that these things may be of value or trigger off some ideas in those who weren't as fortunate as I was in working with him. We oldies who were lucky to have first-hand tuition from Cecchetti himself look back, and maybe some of our memories are wrong or distorted. I don't know. But I feel that apart from the method, it was his manner of teaching that was so incredibly valuable. And he had certain things which he wished to get out of his pupils. And he would use different tactics, and this was the brilliance of the teacher, not just of the method. The method obviously helped, and all that had gone to make it. But if I could give some examples, he would stress movement and dance. Now he would shout at one to get moving, to cover the ground. He would storm and rave. He would run round the room chasing you to get you going further. He would hit you, and he even one time, and I'll tell you the exact step because one remembers these things very clearly. The jeté in attitude, assemblée, jeté in attitude, posé, assemblée, jeté in attitude, posé, assemblée, jeté in attitude. You all know the step. Now, when it came to the posé, assemblée, jeté, I was not travelling enough. So he crept up behind me while I was doing the step, and at the moment I took off from the posé, assemblée, he put his hand under my seat, and believe it or not, I found myself several yards ahead when I landed. And because he was so clever at it, I didn't sit down, but I landed perfectly balanced. But it showed me the feeling of going through the air on that assemblée, and that is what he wanted. And then he would go back to his seat and chortle with joy. Another step was the going back step of the citon, the échappé, coupé, arabesque, coupé, jeté, jeté. Now I loved this step, and he would insist that you went from one side of the room to the other on it. You had to do this tremendous travel. Now I flung myself gaily into this step, and I went from one wall to the other, and he was thrilled. And I was congratulated, and he was happy, and I was happy. And I felt wonderful because I'd pleased him. And I went on doing it like this for quite a time, until suddenly one day there would be the most fantastic storm as to why I travelled on the last jeté. The last step didn't travel. Now, I was much too frightened of him, and much too young to argue with him. But Vincenzo Celli, who was the principal male dancer at that time, would always argue. And this is what really drove him mad. And Celli would argue, and so Cecchetti would go to his chair. This is what he always did when he got angry, nearly always with Celli. And he would take his towel off the peg and wrap it round his face, and either turn his chair to the wall so that his face was to the wall, and his towel round his face so that he couldn't hear anything, and sit huddled like that, and everyone else would stand about feeling very uncomfortable and not able to do anything because he wouldn't hear anything. Or if he was even more annoyed, and this happened quite often, he would not only wrap his towel round his head, but he would get his coat off the peg, because this is another thing. Always every morning when he first came in, he hung it carefully on the peg on the wall, put his towel over the peg. Then he would sit in his very white shirt and his little short trousers and black boots. But as I said, when he was really angry, he would also take his coat off the peg and would proceed downstairs to his stage dressing room and would sit there in fury until somebody, usually one of the children, had to be got out of class to go and talk to him and persuade him to come back to the class. Meanwhile, of course, nobody did anything except feel uncomfortable and very sad. But to get back to my point about the argument, you see, I think you've got to have the two sides. A good teacher will give you all sides to dance. Now you people, you're all teachers. You all know and go about the country and see different schools and different sets of children. And you will find the schools who are meticulous to a degree on the technique, on the placing, on the accuracy of the work, to such an extent that the whole dance and quality has gone. There isn't any, because they're being so careful that the whole dance is lost. Then alternatively, you can go to another school where the children will be tearing round the room, hurling themselves about, dancing to their uttermost and enjoying every movement of it, and really moving, but with appalling inaccuracies, bad technique and placing, the lot. Both are obviously wrong. This brings me back to the point that it is the teacher that really counts. Now you have this wonderful method, we hope, at your fingertips to help you. But it is up to the teacher to use it. And I've always found with all the teachers I went to, and that was a great number, because I went to the Russians and I studied in France and Italy as well as in England, I enjoyed the sudden, absolutely unpredictableness of the teacher. Take Marie Rambert for one. She would be absolutely beyond herself at the disgraceful footwork in the pas de bourrée. And she would go on and on and on this movement for what seemed like half an hour. And one really got so frustrated because she didn't know what she wanted or what was wrong, and everyone would be at the end of their tether. But you went on and on doing that movement, and then probably for the next 2 or 3 months she would ignore that movement completely because she was working on something else, probably the movement, the linking movement, from what you did before the bourrée to what you did after the bourrée. But all that practice and frustration had obviously done one a world of good, and you came to class never knowing what was going to be the bugbear of the day. This created excitement, it created fear, and you kept you alert and keyed up. And this, I think, is the most valuable thing. And again, I think, is something you get from a really good teacher who always has something new. You're never dull, never, never dull. And this was Cecchetti. And he brought out all these different points. I was talking about this citon. Little bits would be worked at and made a tremendous fuss of. And then after a time one had to dance it. So one always came back to the dance. So the essential was the dance, the movement, the stretch, the quality. Even if your technique suffered, then you would come back and correct your technique or something else, everything else, quietly. There is another little step, Cecchetti semble-t-on levé from the corner. Now this, because we have downgraded it, i.e. put it into the advanced instead of the diploma, we only expect it slowly. I think it should be put back into the diploma as well, and this should be done with other steps as well, because seeing that it is being downgraded, it is taught to the student who is not too good and therefore cannot do this step at the speed it should be taken. So it's done slowly and very carefully, and in doing this, the quality of the step has gone. That step was meant to be brilliant. It was a step of excitement, and if you got to the corner, there was a bravo. It was quick, and that's what gave it its quality. And you had to have the speed, and without that you get an exaggerated pull-up of the second foot, an exaggerated ton leve. Well, the step isn't what it should be. Now, I know when you learn it, you have to do it slowly, but we've left it like that. And now the present students think it as it should be, because it has been made simple for them. They never see it at its correct speed, and that is why I would like to see these steps, which have been downgraded and done slowly and carefully in the lower grades, added, or asked for at least, in the diploma work. So we can then see them as Cecchetti taught them, to his class of perfection, and that exciting quality that they have. So again the students would see what was the ultimate goal. I think sometimes one gets the wrong idea. One has to remember that Cecchetti was teaching professionals. Therefore he taught his basic ideals, and he stressed them very much. The two most important things to him being the quality and the movement. And the movement, by that I mean the travel sideways, forwards and back, or down and up. Both now, when he taught, unlike the teaching of today, he taught that first. He taught first the quality and movement of the step, and then later, with the added technique which you worked at day by day, you acquired the perfection of the smaller movements. But the main thing was to get the essence of the enchaînement first, and the essence of the dance quality, which made the whole thing exciting and interesting. When I went to him, I knew very little, but being a very strong technical dancer for my age, I knew nothing of his method, but he never corrected me technically, other than at the bar and in the centre practice. Once I came to the adage and the allegro, etc., all the corrections were in the quality of the movement, the travel, the covering of the ground, the elevation, the depth of the plie, the travel on the diagonal, the speed. This was a very big factor, speed. Either the slowness to sustain, or the very exciting speed of the diagonal turns. And as long as you did it, that was all that mattered. And if you couldn't do it, he would tell you why. But the main thing was to do it, and not be bogged down by being told your arms have to go here, or your arms go there, and your feet do this, that, and the other. You got on with it, and nobody helped you until you had messed it up. And then they told you why. And then you tried again, and messed it up again. And then they told you why. And then, if you were stupid, he hit you. But if you were quick-witted, you learned, and you got the essence of it. And only when you could do it did he come down to the details to correct what would make it look better, be easier perhaps, give you more security, and so on. But the approach was from the top to the bottom, whereas nowadays the approach is from the bottom to the top. And by the time you come to the top, you're so bogged down by the technical difficulties and the technical know-hows that you never get to the top. And this is the difference, I think, of the teaching of Cecchetti then and the teaching of the Cecchetti work today. One day that stands out very clearly in my memory is the day that Anna Pavlova came to watch our class. She and her company were dancing at the theatre that week for the first time in Milan, I believe, and some of her dancers came to class with us. Then we were told that the next day Pavlova herself would come, and we were all very scared. Gia Vonaroli showed me her développé with her legs shaking. Pavlova looked so beautiful and so frail when she arrived, and Cecchetti was so excited, especially at the nice things she said about everyone. Then, in the evening, we were all taken to see her company. Cecchetti had arranged a fleet of taxis to take us to the theatre, where we found they had put down a red carpet for him. I think he was too excited to notice, and ran up the steps and hurried us in to the 4 boxes he'd booked, 2 on either side of the dress circle, the 2 stage boxes, that is. Then he ran from one side to the other, all round the theatre, buying us all the special programmes, and also producing a very sticky bag of toffees each time he appeared. In the interval, he came onto the stage and presented Pavlova with a picture of himself and his wife, who had died a few years before. And of course, she presented him with the inevitable rose from her bouquet. It was a wonderful evening. Cecchetti had his own unique method of placing his class, which was to stand them in the shape of a horseshoe with one dancer in the centre. Then, each day, all the dancers would move on one pace clockwise, so that each member of the class had the rather frightening privilege of being in the centre front, in turn. Everyone was supposed to know the work completely, and he reckoned that 2 weeks was enough to learn the lot. And as the daily programme was up on the wall, there was no excuse for not studying it each day before class. He also insisted on having a week of starting all adagio and allegro with the right foot, and the next week with the left foot. And, so that there was no mistake, the first allegro of the day would start with that foot in front, and woe betide anyone who made a mistake. We worked at great heat, and when one day Cecchetti found me opening a window before class, he was furious. I was doing this to try and clear the air, which was really putrid after 4 classes of the company school. But he made me promise never to do it again, as we would all have pneumonia. One helpful thing was that the studio was high up in the building, built over the theatre, the stage of the Scala Opera House, and had a floor with the same amount of rake as the stage. This was a great asset. I believe the stage was the largest in the world at that time. But it is such a help to have had this experience with the rake before you join a company. I'm sorry to say that I felt that Cecchetti had no interest at all in point work. Either you were strong on point or you weren't. And if you weren't, you'd just never make a dancer. I never remember his giving any advice on one's shoes, and of course there were only one make, porcelli, which were very, very soft and difficult if you had a big instep. But the important thing was that never must you make a noise when landing from a jump, however high. Here I'm sure he was right. Cecchetti often appeared to be cruel to his pupils when he would hit them with one of his sticks, but we all forgave him, as instinctively we realized that it was done for our benefit and was his way of making sure we didn't repeat the mistake. He would spin his stick along the ground so it caught one's ankles, and then make the culprit bring it back to him. Or else he would hit your arm, which brought up a big bruise. But one made sure that arm was held in the right place next time. In spite of all this, we all loved him, and I often heard it said that he was the most loved man in the whole of Milan.
Okay, I was very, very, very fortunate to meet Margaret Marsh back in 1975 at summer school with the Cecchetti Council of America. The Cecchetti organization, especially in England, was revising the entire syllabus, major syllabus at the time. So we had this new level called 7A, Advanced 7A, which was breaking what is now diploma and advanced into three exams: 7A, 7B, 7C. Well, we didn't have 7B and 7C yet, but we had 7A. And I was the first one to take this exam with the CCA, and Margaret Marsh was there, and I'd be doing various patterns, and she'd go, "Oh no, that's not the way Cecchetti did it." Oh, it was because we were still in the learning process over here in the U.S. of getting all of this work. Um, we for forever only went through intermediate. So I corrected it, and the way she worked with me. First, I have to say, I had had a lot of training with people like Madame Pereslovic, uh, and in the Russian school, as well as Cecchetti all my life. I found Cecchetti to be most boring because of exactly what she stated. It was taught from the bottom up. And as dancers, we learn the choreography and then we perfect it. Learning what my foot does, what my leg does, what my hip does. Oh, and then you have your arms and your head and your eyes. It was so slow. And I think for all of us that were dancers, your brain works like that to learn the choreography. You get it quickly. You have to get it quickly or you'll never make it in the company. Um, and so being young, I was always like, Are we ever going to move on? With Margaret Marsh, you moved on. You corrected quickly like that. And then the emphasis on the movement and the quality. I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I love this. I started to see Cecchetti a whole different way. And it opened my eyes up. And then later, after I took that 7A exam, as I said, I was the first candidate. It was on point. And I might say the floor was horrible. It was an old studio that had that for a floor. uh, but then I was asked questions that I thought were so stupid. I was like, what is this? Doing rondezvous mater at the bar, what can you injure? And I'm thinking, I'm a dancer. I'm an advanced level. I'm not going to injure anything. Doing a rondezvous mater. Then we get out in the center and we're doing fouette sauté assis-top. And that same examiner came back and said, now what can you injure doing that rondezvous? And I said, well, now I could injure a lot doing this one because I'm jumping, my leg is in the air, and it's a grand rondezvous. So I could injure anything from my foot all the way up to my back. But I was like, okay, one of our problems is we did not get the questions for the majors at a level of a dancer. What is going on with the dancer at this level? It still kept going back down to the, are you holding your turnout? Are you pointing your feet? Well, you can't dance intermediate through diploma if you don't have that technique. Bottom line, it's got to be there so that we can work on the essence of the Cecchetti work. And this is what Peggy really, really stressed, was the movement across the floor, the speed of the movement. Like she pointed out, that jeté, jeté, assemblé, ton levé. It's not jeté, jeté, assemblé, ton levé. It's jeté, jeté, assemblé, ton levé, jeté, jeté, assemblé, ton levé. And get across the floor and finish it beautifully. And I have noticed over the years these tempos that have been slowed down in allegro, speeded up in adage. With Peggy, I was able to take my time in an adage. If I did that développé into écarté, stress, breathe out of it and move on into the next movement. And I could have retards, I could have accelerandos, and really dance the movement as a dancer. Technique had to be there. In allegro, most of my allegro was probably, except for the Grand Allegro, faster than a lot of people have ever seen it. And I felt excited by this, that I could actually move quickly and then da-da, with an ending. She really made me love the work and want to pass it on. So then I went and I lived with, I learned diploma, by the way, in 1 week. Notice how she said in there 2 weeks. Well, 1 week, I learned the entire syllabus. And then I practiced it 5 days a week with my pianist on my own. Then I went to England and attended summer school at Lillyshaw and continued to work with it there. And every day after class, Margaret Marsh would work with me. Then I came back home and I practiced it for another whole season, every day with my pianist. Then I went to England and lived with Laura Wilson because Margaret Marsh felt that my body and my arms, because I have very long arms. Nothing else is very long on me, but my arms are. And that I was built more like her and my quality was more like her. She wanted me to get that very, because I was also a very bravura dancer. I mean, I wanted to, Don Cuba. Ah! Yeah, I love that. But being softer like a Giselle was not my natural style. So she wanted me to work with her to get more of that artistry. So I did. Living with Laura was quite an experience, by the way. I know this is about Margaret Marsh, but Laura was quite a. I actually lived in her little dressing room, and she would have classes, and I'd be sound asleep, and these dancers would be changing around me. I was like, fine, I'll just sleep. Okay, then she liked to work late at night, which is fine with me. So we would be working sometimes at midnight on diploma. And then she sent me to Peggy to get her approval. And I was up there with Peggy living in Droitwich at her farm, which she calls a farm, but it was an incredible estate house, which I finally did an oil painting of and sent to her as a gift afterwards. And she was quite pleased with what I was doing. And I went, well, that's something. And I took the exam, and my examiners were pupils of Cecchetti, Mary Skeeping, Molly Lake, and Eve Pittenger at that time was doing, I guess, an apprentice for becoming a diploma examiner. And I brought my pianist, flew over, and played for my exam. Music was incredibly important. It was important to Cecchetti. It was important, even though it's hard to tell sometimes that Cecchetti thought music was important because of how basic the music is today. But musicality is not. Can you tell if it's a 2/4 duple time or triple time? It is phrasing. It is how the dancer interprets the music and the phrasing of the music. Not every body is going to feel it the same. Not everybody emotionally feels music the same. And being a musician as well, I've always said I was the worst pianist at the University of Maryland ever graduated. But one of the things that helped me with diploma is that every day I would play that music on the piano, and in my mind I would dance it. So that my pianist and I then worked together to get the nuances in the music the way that I felt it. In the exam, sometimes the examiners went, oh my, especially in adage where I would have a long retard going into something, but they liked it. Margaret Marsh very much encouraged all of this in me to bring out my musicality and artistry, which is what Cecchetti did. He brought out the artistry of the individual dancer. So, Mary's Keeping, who I had also had classes with the CCA when I was much younger. And when I was younger, I had no idea who she was and what a renowned person she was. But I liked her. She was great with choreography. That I liked. Molly Lake, I really virtually knew nothing about. But before my exam, I got a glimpse of her doing Batma a la seconde over her head. She was not a young chicken. And I went, oh my. okay, she can still do. And that was very exciting to see that. Then in my exam, wearing my tutu, which Laura Wilson, how do I put this delicately? She liked to imbibe in her wine every night. Well, she decided my tutu was too long, so she cut it. I still have the tutu hanging in my closet to this day, and it sort of goes unevenly around. Longer on one side, shorter on the other. But I was like, she cut it. This is perfect. And in my point shoes, freezing in April, it was April 7th, 1977. The heater boxes at London College were up by the ceiling. We all know that heat rises, it doesn't come down. My pianist bobbing up every few minutes to warm his hands up so he could play the piano. And I'm there, tights, pointed shoes, a sleeveless leotard, and a black tutu, hoping that they don't ask too many questions because the longer I stop dancing, the colder I'm getting. And fortunately, there was not a lot of this, except they asked one question, which I'm afraid I got carried away with. And that was, tell me everything you know about Portobello. Well, I talked for about 25 minutes and then said, have you had enough? They said, yeah, because this is something that Margaret Marsh and I actually discussed quite a bit. And we were both in total agreement that each one gets bigger and bigger, stronger, and around you. And then it starts to involve the body, and it's bigger and it's bigger. And then you start to use the body into the port-de-bras until you're doing a full spiral in the body, and it finishes so that it grows from here to there. Not so tight and stiff to be exact on everything. It moves. It has emotion. It feels. So, okay, I made it through diploma. Then thank goodness, my pianist grabbed my arm as we were just in time before a car was going to hit me in London, because I was like in another world mentally. And I walked right out in front of a car and he pulled me back. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here to tell you the story. So I then from there was sent back to live with Margaret Marsh for a while because Laura didn't think I looked healthy enough to go back home. They needed me to look a little bit better. So I was sent out to the farm where I got the joy of cleaning her pond. And I was outside for half the day, and it still was not that warm in England. And I had never cleaned a house, let alone a pond. So this was quite an education from Margaret Marsh to me on life. That, well, we must learn how to do some of these other things. There's more than just ballet in the world. So there I am cleaning out her pond, going, this is disgusting. But you know what? Since then, I have cleaned out at least 3 ponds every summer. And I live on a farm. I climb trees. I cut branches. I trim hedges and found that, yes, there's a lot more in life besides ballet. I learned a lot from Margaret Marsh about life and about Cecchetti. After that, we communicated quite often. Then finally, I'd heard that she had been put into a nursing home. Her husband was in one, and she was now in one because she had arthritis really bad. She had been taking medication for the arthritis and finally destroyed her stomach and was the beginning of the downfall of Margaret Marsh. She lived in a nursing home until she died. She wrote me these letters of what she was hoping I would do with the Cecchetti work and carry on for her. She wanted me to actually start an ISTD Cecchetti Society in Washington, D.C. Well, my godmother was Gertrude Jory, who was one of the founders, and if I'm right, Kathleen Tenniswood, who's sitting here, she was the first president of the CCA. And my mother had been brought up and done this, been with CCA and held her fellowship. And I said, I would love to be able to do that, but I feel I have to stay with the CCA because of my mother and my godmother. There's stories I could tell you about my godmother. She was diabetic. Some of you saw her picture that I posted on Facebook. She was gorgeous. She died at a very young age from an abscess of a tooth that went to her brain. She went into a coma as an examiner, examining grade 4 students, and never came out of it here in Washington. And I just felt, no, I have got to see what I can do to help the organization that I am with. It has been a challenge, but I have not given up, and I will not give up on helping this Cecchetti work to be done the way, as close to the way as Cecchetti did it, as I was taught by Peggy Marsh and Laura Wilson. And to that end, I am faithful. However, with the help of my dear friend Cara, and I mean my dear friend Cara, and Barbara, we started the Cecchetti Institute, which I dedicate to Margaret Marsh and Laura Wilson, to preserve the work as close to the way that he wanted it and to have it taught in the manner, without the sticks, by the way, because I don't want to be sued. As choreography, to make it move, to make it dance, not from the bottom up, but from the top down. I then received a last letter from Margaret Marsh, which she said, this will be my last letter, as it is difficult for me to write now. I put this work in your hands and hope you will help to preserve it with my love. Margaret Marsh. I never called her Peggy. I called her Miss Marsh. But she was like a second mother to me. I grew to love her and to love her family, Jane and Penelope, and miss that very much in my life. But to that end, and for people from the CCA here who have seen me battle, I battle very well. That is why I am committed to Gertrude Jory, to my mother, to Laura Wilson, and to Margaret Marsh. And I will fight to the end of my life, which I'm 76, soon to be 77. Who knows? It could happen tomorrow. It could happen 10 years from now. But it must be known how Cecchetti did this work and that it danced. You can talk about with teachers about uh, the build-up. The build-up is done in the technique. It should start with grade 1. We get that technique. We build up to the point where we can learn the choreography and quit worrying about whether or not you turned your leg out. It better be turned out. Okay, that's how I teach it. You turn that leg out or get out of here. If you don't know how to turn out by the time you're an intermediate, you shouldn't be there. It is this work that has to be. This is his work. So with that, I want to thank all of you for coming and listening to my second mother, who I dearly love and miss. I'm finished. I didn't mention mime, but mime was so incredibly important to Cecchetti. It had to be. If you look at, Barbara and I were talking just before this, they're, caribous with that incredible makeup, and then he dances Bluebird. But all the way through his work, we call it port-de-bras. Let's call it mime. Because all the way through, I'm blowing a kiss from my heart to you. Ah, ah. It's to you. It's not pose en avant. It's to you. He has it all the way through. Mime with the arms. He was a great mimist. Well, one day, this is a story about I was examining, and I let the little grade 1s, because I always like to spoil them, leave with their polkas, and I told them that I wanted them each to be a different animal doing their polka, leaving the room. You should have heard the feedback I got on that from the council. Oh, you can't do that with that's so unprofessional. I said, well, nobody told Cecchetti that wasn't professional to do mime. It's a part of his work. Why not? So to this day, I will still do it because it's part of Cecchetti. And he loved getting all that makeup and everything on and looking really scary and horrible. I said to Barbara, I said, I would like to know more about Cecchetti's parents, their training, actually. Just like a lot of people, okay, yes, I studied quite a bit with Margaret Marsh and Laura Wilson. I also studied a great deal in New York with Madame Pereslovic, whom I absolutely loved. And she had her tap shoes on and a heel, and if you didn't get your leg high enough, your foot was going to get the leg higher. And she had quite a sense of humor. She would open a door to her studio and then do a pattern to get rid of somebody from the class and let them dance out the door and close it. She didn't throw them out of class. They danced out of class. Things like that. But we have to find some way to incorporate into the examination methods. Cecchetti did not have a method. That's why his parents, I'm sure, were his first teachers. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I would like to know more about his parents. And the foundation was put there someplace. And a lot of people forget that foundation, those beginning teachers who are so I love the cattail. Those teachers are so ignored in every way in dancers' resumes. They forget that first ballet teacher they had who gave them the foundation is then taken on by people who can help them with the artistry, the musicality, and all of this. That takes a lot of patience, a lot of time, and a lot of courage. You're working with 6, 7, 8-year-olds, especially today, it takes a lot of courage. Oh, it does, Judith.
I believe you. I believe you.
The parents are always, my child could not have done anything wrong. They're perfect. They're super talented.
At the
Uh,
Met, when I went there, I was watching class and Miss Krask said to a boy, I told you to do one pirouette. Sit down over there and think of your sins. And the boy went over and sat on the steps, and she left him there for much of the class. You couldn't get away with that nowadays. You have to say, well, dear, I would really prefer it if you would do one pirouette when I asked you to do one pirouette. Okay? And I said, I mean, we don't have that kind of decisiveness anymore because we're not allowed to have it. We have to sugar them up.
well, everybody wonders why I teach in boots. I don't have to yell. I just stomp my foot on the floor. They get the point. Plus, boots are more comfortable than ballet shoes. There are there are ways around it, but we uh, we need to still excite these kids. We need to still pull them in some way. But that beginning teacher is the one who has to do it. They're the ones that get them to love ballet and to dance and to want to learn and progress. They have the toughest job. And I have so much respect for those teachers, and I just wish that the dancers would have show more respect to those teachers. Kathleen, unmute. You're still you're still muted, Kathleen.
Okay,
Hey.
I've pressed unmute. All right. Tara had her hand up a long time ago and she was not
Sorry, Tara.
acknowledged.
She's my friend.
I know, you're very good friends. She can speak too. I'm sure she has much to offer.
Yes. You're next, Carl.
Well,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
yes.
Lovely. Okay. No, what I wanted to do is perhaps share some of lucky experiences I had, because I was when I was working at Tring, it was in the 80s, and Margaret Marsh used to come and examine for us quite a lot. And it was in those days when you actually had the courage to ask the examiner, you'd say, was there anything wrong? Can you help me with this? Actually, I'm not sure about that exercise. Can you clarify for me? We could actually ask questions in those days. It's not encouraged now here in England, but we did that. And I got a lot from that. And I remember asking her questions. And at one time, Pam was saying she went up to the farm. Eve and I actually went up there one day and did a whole lot. We went through advanced. And I was just wondering, listening to you talking, I mean, I'm very grateful to all the things she told us and helped us with. But I was hearing what you were saying, you're saying how she approached it through the movement and everything. And I thought, well, actually what she did was she was able to inspire, because if you go through the movement, the dancer gets excited about how it's working, etc. And I can't agree more that you start at the top and go down, because if they've had a chance to try, they think, okay, why didn't that work? And they get interested. Anyway, I just wondered if you'd be interested in some of the things that she actually told us. I don't know, would you like me to just go through a few of the notes?
Please.
Okay.
Please.
Yes, love it.
Okay. Think of the glissa Cecchetti, glissa for Cecchetti, into that big, before you come into the everything. It says, glissade, huge, get down to your foot, right down to your foot. Okay, so then you come right up. So you see nowadays a little bit, oh, I've got to fondue, and they don't actually get right down. And I think there's a lot they used to say, and Laura Wilson used to say this, bend much more, we don't bend enough. So that was one of the examples. Then going on about bending, the avec jeté, the grand enjambe, entour avec jeté, the last phrase, you've got that big jeté, which lands in a fondue. She said, fondue, fondue, more, 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 more. And what she was wanting was the thought, okay, can't actually do it, But the thought is that you land there and you so fondue so deeply that your back leg touches the floor. Now, we know that's not actually possible, but what we see is, if not careful, is the leg goes down and we do a twitch for bend of the knee instead of melt, melt, keep out from that jump, you keep the melt, you keep the melt, you keep the melt. And all this was a qualitative thing, which you get excited about to get it right. So that was that. On the Monday step, the glissade, assemblée, and the pas de bourrée across the room into the assemblée en tournant. Walk away from your arms, she said. No, quite often you see people doing something. In fact, she said, just turn the body and walk away from your arms. And it makes, again, it's the body that's doing the work and the feet and legs follow. So
I remember that really well. She would use that expression, and people today are turning it into this.
They do something.
Instead of it's a feeling.
Yeah. The other thing I really connect with her very much is that that diagonal step of brise, pas de bourrée, and the pas de bourrée en tournant, tombe, pas de bourrée. She said literally throughout the whole thing, the body and the weight of the body makes the movement. Very like Devawa says, Devawa says the body causes the feet to do it. It's the body, but this is what Peggy was actually saying, get the body swing. And for the pas de bourrée, she said, burn it. So whenever I teach that now, I think, burn it, as if you got so hot on the floor, be so fast. And that way you get the excitement, the dynamics. I think, you talk about movement, it's dynamics, isn't it? You
and
get
a lot faster.
Yes, well, then you get something
Yes.
Yes, that's what she meant, I think. Burn it, don't hover around, it's fast.
Right.
Definitely. And I want to ask the CCA something here, because there's a note, because Eve and I took notes, and I've got a few of her notes, and she's made a note here where she's got on the brise pas de bourrée, the brise pas de bourrée, brise pas de bourrée. She says USA, meaning you, because she knew that Peggy went over there. We knew that. And she says angel wings. Did you used to call that exercise angel wings? This one. Did you call it angel wings? Because she said USA. This came from Peggy. This doesn't make any sense to you.
I don't recall angel wings.
You don't recall. That's what this is.
I don't either.
Note I've got here anyway, but I don't know, maybe it was, or maybe I wondered if you in fact had nicknamed it that over there or something.
Also, Cara, on that, the USA tends to do, and then they all go there. They forget to float it up.
Okay. Okay, the other thing I've got here is, that lovely step, going around the room in the diploma. She said she said, you've got to bend, get the back of your hand on the floor.
Absolutely.
So there's the various things. The other thing that she did on the Tuesday step, I asked this question because we often wonder about direction. And the Tuesday step, that one.
Yes.
So where do the hips face on that? I asked her, and she said, Cara, unless you keep the hips to the front, you're going to be in trouble if you want to go fast. Because of course you're then going to be twiddling your hips. So of course she said, you'll keep the hips to the front, you'll also have a more turned out supporting leg and twist from the waist. So I've always thought, Peggy, whenever I teach that, various things I think of, and I'm very grateful that I had.
Which shows why people in modern at that time would study with Margaret Krask in the States, because when people criticize Cecchetti for not having enough epaulement, I just have to say, put it bluntly, especially with the way I tend to say things, you're an idiot. There's more epaulement in Cecchetti than you can imagine. It is all of this breakdown stuff that people lose it. Because it has always been hips to the front, grand fouette, hips to the front, turn. You're not square to the corner doing that fouette. But then I have to go, well, who am I to criticize? I live on a farm.
So I'm just sort of thinking, is there anything else I've got here? She did say, this is something that came up in my exam, because she did examine me for my advanced. Of course, you always remember what happens in an exam. And I remember, and I think sometimes you forget this, thinking of renversés. You can't actually do a renversé unless you incorporate a forward bend. And I remember in my exam, I was doing sideways, back and sideways. And she said, yes, but what else? And I've never forgotten that, because of course, unless you go forwards, you can't get the back bend, because the forward turns into the back bend. So that was interesting too. Yeah. So I think
Thank you. That is really, and that's why Cara and I are together. Okay. It is so important, and to all of you, to try and preserve the essence of this work. It is about artistry. It is about quality. It is about movement. The only thing that has hurt Cecchetti is actually that most people never see it beyond grade 5 elementary. That would be the highest that most people ever see. And they get a dancer who perhaps did not do well in an exam, and they judge Cecchetti. We have to show the true value of this work. And I will openly say here with Raymond and Franco, I was fighting 100% for one of these Cecchetti organizations to get behind them, because they have incorporated this quality with the ABT program that they developed so beautifully. It's a shame. It is a shame that that the actual organizations were too up here or felt too threatened, whatever it was, not to get behind them and join them. So there you go. Just so you know, I still fight for that, but it's too late now. Besides, you guys are doing great. You know, I
Not
wish I could hang on your
necessarily.
coattail and travel with you. I'll carry your luggage. No, I won't. I've gotten too weak.
I have to, Julie Ken, she did the course because ABT, if you teach for ABT, you had to do the ABT course. And Julie Ken's mother kept calling her, says, are they talking about Cecchetti? Are they talking about Cecchetti? She would constantly said, she says, yes, Mom, they're talking about Cecchetti.
Yeah, it's not to say that there aren't good things in the others, because there are. I mean, what you've done is you've brought some of the best together. I would just like to see the art of ballet turn back into the art of ballet. I don't want to have to be a gymnast in order to take my first ballet class.
Well, I, for one, am sick of gynecological ballet. All these high extensions. I'm fed up with them.
Now, Judith, you
Along with the
aren't saying
pirouettes.
that because you couldn't get your leg that high, are you? Yes,
It's not even pretty.
No, it isn't. It's ugly.
I
Bill has her hand
wonder
up.
if I could share something. Barbara, I'm sorry I didn't find these in time. I found another couple of photos.
Oh, I'm excited. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
These are from the, I don't know if, actually, I think I can't share because it's, maybe I'll send a request and see if you can.
Yes, yes. Yep. Okay. Should be okay.
This one's, it's not very good quality at all.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see it.
You can see it's a newspaper article. From when she was teaching. I mean, it says the 35th annual ballet conference and seminar. So I'm presuming maybe this was when it was the ballet committee from the Michigan Dance Masters.
Yes, it is, and that is Kathy Cook.
Oh, yeah. So
This is not from the ballet from dancing masters. This is specifically Cecchetti Council, because Margaret Marsh was not here before it became the Cecchetti Council of America.
Oh, okay. So the 35th, so it's the 35th of the CCA or of the ballet committee? Because it was the ballet committee before it was the CCA.
Okay, it was at Michigan's. Yes, it
Okay.
was. It was and it was a ballet committee while it was part of Dancing Masters. When they broke away from Dancing Masters, they voted in October of 34, I believe, October, November of 1934, to be the Cecchetti Council of America. So this was long before this, and it was at Michigan State University. It says they're at Shaw Hall. Tommy Stu Pollock isn't old enough to have been involved at the Dance Masters Ballet Committee level.
And I have one more that I will share, and this one is like my favorite of the pictures.
Oh, yes.
One I also had, and this when Kathleen and I were doing the history of Cecchetti in America video for the CICB centenary, we came across this, and I have a note from you, Kathleen, that the gentleman on the left is possibly Celli.
Yes, and I think the dancer is Chia Fornaroli. I think the dancer is Chia Fornaroli.
Oh, this one I had. This one I had that it was Margaret Marsh.
Oh, okay, maybe it is.
There's another one that's definitely Fioroni.
Okay. Well, her face is the shape of Margaret Marsh's, so very likely it is.
And it's a similar haircut to the other one we had that we saw earlier.
Yes, that's right.
So, and I emailed them to you, Barbara.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, anything we can accumulate. I need to get into the archives for the Vic Wells Ballet to see what ballet she performed in, to start adding that kind of thing to the bio. So anything anybody has be great.
We have some photos of her in Florence, so we can send you those too.
Oh, thank you.
See, I feel really sad. I've never been one to take pictures.
Either.
So I never took a picture of anything.
Well, we didn't used to take them like crazy either. So,
No.
Yeah. Now we have too many and don't go through them.
I still don't take pictures.
Well.
Here. Anybody else have any memories of Miss Marsh or comments on things she had to say or anything?
Well,
Can I just thank Laura McCarthy? Laura, you got us going on this because of that. And I have it this thing is in a CCA newsletter, the whole thing, from spring of 1990. So if you can find a newsletter spring of 1990, good luck. But
yeah, I've also transcribed it, so the talk. So
I want to thank all of you for showing up for her talk. It's hard for me to actually listen to her voice. Pam is not really an emotional person generally, except when I heard her voice the first time, the tears just started flowing. And it is so, I just feel so grateful that you came out to hear what she had to say. And hope that we can all try and help to keep it dancing.